Hi everybody, welcome back. In this next series of videos, we're going to be looking at another major broad topic within macroeconomics, which is the labor market. And the primary way which a lot of economists and others use to gauge the health of the labor market is the unemployment rate. We're going to look at a couple other different statistics as well and talk about some of the kind of pros and cons of each of these measurements and how the what exactly the unemployment rate is, and how it doesn't capture some of the important things going on in the labor market. So we're going to explain our definitions, explain the technical details on how unemployment is measured and calculated, and then we'll go into some discussion about business cycles, unemployment trends, natural, frictional, structural unemployment. And so, yeah, that's going to cover the next couple videos here. And so let's go ahead and dive in to our first section. What we're going to start with is looking at a couple business cycles here and looking at the unemployment rate during the first I guess 15 years of the 2000s. So as you can see, first of all, this comes from Federal Reserve Economic Data, and it's online, it's free, easy to access, easy to use, highly recommend it. The gray bars here represent recessions. So when we have drops in GDP and we get designated a recession, here we have the Great Recession after the financial crash, subprime mortgage collapse in 2007 until 2009. Here we had a little recession there at the end of 2001. And as you can see, during these recessions, when GDP would be going down and then back up and then down again during recessions and then back up, what we call this, and we'll talk about it a little later, is the unemployment rate runs counter-cyclical to GDP. So when GDP is going down, the unemployment rate is going up. And so we were coming off of a great decade in the 90s, and then we hit a recession, unemployment goes up, works its way back down, and then recession back up, works its way back down. We got actually as low as 3.5%. And then as high as during the COVID crisis, 14.7%. And now it's been ticking its way back down again. So this is just a little bit of a look at business cycles, up and down and up and down. And and so unemployment is going to follow pretty directly with GDP. Okay, so this is a little bit of a look at what unemployment has been doing. Actually, during COVID, this went way up, even past the scale of this, up to the 14.7, and then back down. So historic high unemployment rates back in 2020. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive into what exactly unemployment is, how we measure it, because there are a few specific things about its measurement which make it a little bit nuanced in how we look at it. And what I'm hoping you'll come out of this series of videos with is thinking and understanding that if you need to be looking or analyzing economic labor market statistics, I really think it's important to look at more than just the unemployment rate. So you're going to see why here in a second. So first, let's go ahead and dive in to how the Bureau of Labor Statistics measures these things. So BLS, Bureau of Labor Statistics, and they do these surveys continuously throughout the year, and they place each adult, so they're defining adults as 16 plus in their labor market statistics, into three categories, and then also some subcategories. But these three major categories are the employed and the unemployed. And let me first say that together, the employed and the unemployed make up the labor force. And if you're not employed or unemployed, you're considered not in the labor force. Okay, but let's go through these first. They're gonna call people up or ask them otherwise whether they've been working. And somebody who is employed is an individual who has spent some of the previous week working at a paid job. So this is an individual who has spent some of the previous week that's the timing of all these matter a little bit, working at a paid job. A paid job. And it does have to be paid. So if you've got some unpaid internship, that's not going to be counting as employed under the BLS definition. Okay, and then the unemployed are a couple options here. So one, it could be an individual who is on temporary layoff. An individual who is on temporary layoff, or and that, temporary layoff happens occasionally during the COVID-19 pandemic. That happened a lot more, and actually the BLS had to change some of their definitions a little bit during COVID, and ask different questions to get some more information about temporary layoffs. But more commonly, during more, I guess, normal bouts of unemployment, you're going to have some people who are unemployed being considered unemployed for the second reason. So this is an individual who was not employed an individual who was not employed, and so they weren't working for pay in the last week. But the second part of this is that an individual was also actively looking for work. Actively looking for work, in the previous 4 weeks. Okay, so let me just pause and emphasize this here. You're only considered unemployed if you're actually looking for a job. If you're not looking for a job, you're going to be considered down here, not in the labor force. So unemployment, either temporary layoff or not working, but actively looking for a job. So otherwise, those who are not in the labor force are individuals who fit in neither category above. Individuals who fit in neither category above. Okay, so actually I'd encourage you to even pause the video and think about what types of individuals, adults 16 plus, are not either employed, working in the last week for a paid job, or unemployed. And just try to think of there are a number of categories of people who fit into this not in the labor force idea. And then actually one last thing is that between the labor force and then those not in the labor force. That's how we'll get our adult population. Okay, so to think about individuals of examples of individuals not in the labor force, we have several. So, first of all, we could have retirees because they're not working for pay and they're not actively searching for a job. Also, full-time students. Who are not working. Another example could be stay-at-home parents because they're not working for pay necessarily. And then there are other categories as well. For example, some people who are disabled or handicapped may not fit into either category, so they may be out of the labor force. Sort of vagabonds or homeless or people who just kind of are maybe taking a gap year or something like that. Those people, if they're not looking for work, they're not considered unemployed. And then finally, this kind of last important category are what we call discouraged workers. These are people who have stopped looking for employment due to the lack of suitable positions available. So those who have stopped looking for employment due to the lack of suitable positions available. I'll write this over here, available. Okay. One other thing before we write these down. Let me just write this here. We'll come back to that. Okay, so to look at how we can use these definitions to calculate unemployment statistics, first we have the labor force, which actually I guess I mentioned up above, but the labor force are those who are employed, number employed plus the number unemployed. That'll give you the labor force. The adult population, which I did just write above, we'll abbreviate labor force as LF. Again, that's those in the labor force plus those not in the labor force. Okay, and then from that we can get our labor market statistics. The most common one that people hear about is the unemployment rate. So this is the number unemployed. So how many people are unemployed divided by the labor force. Okay, and we'll talk about some of the specifics of these calculations in a minute. Let's go ahead and just write them down. Another one is the labor force participation rate. So this one is the labor force divided by the adult population. And then finally, employment population ratio. This is the number of people employed divided by the adult population. Okay, and so these are three kind of high-level labor market health statistics, and we can do that for the entire population, as is often done, and when we see reports in the news about the latest unemployment rate, that's going to be this one here, and it's going to be for the entire population. But I do just want to note that another way that people measure these unemployment statistics is by looking at the prime age population. And those are people between the ages of 25. Let's do ages 25 through 54. Because we would expect that most people within this population, most of them are done with schooling, full-time schooling, and most of them have not yet retired. So this prime age group is a group of people who we would expect to be working, and so we kind of would expect to have higher, lower unemployment rates or higher labor force participation or employment population ratio. And so that's also just another way to slice the data to think about labor market health. Okay, so just a quick view of this pie chart here. From July of 2019, we had quite a high level of employment. This was all pre-COVID. And what we're going to do in the next video is we're going to go ahead and calculate. We have those numbers there. And we're going to calculate the statistics for all of those unemployment rate, labor force participation rate, and employment population ratio, to give an example. So that's the definitions, that's how we calculate them, and now we're actually going to put that into practice and calculate those labor market statistics. We're going to do that in the next video. So I will see you there. Thanks.